Greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and as always, welcome back to our Around the Hearth discussions. We are on our final chat for Showdown at High June month, and we're going to be talking about the Weird West. We better get into it, because I got a lot of notes. So, let's go ahead and get announcements out of the way. Far as the announcements go, I'll start us off again like I usually do so other people can think about what they want to say. The Inn of Planar Crossroads is currently on its way to getting $100 per month support when we get there, when you guys support us get there, because all of this content is supported by travelers and viewers like you. We will be doing a big giveaway because we really want to say thank you for that. So we'll be doing some metal dice probably if we go over the $100 enough. Well, I'll splurge and get some of those made. And I'm sure we'll be doing some game giveaways. We have a certain individual who's going full-time GMing, so maybe we'll toss some money his way to run a few games for the patrons and everything. So there you go. And he knows several systems, so you might be able to request a system. But that is what I've got going on right now at the Inn of Planar Crossroads, along with our collaborations, for which we'll start with Dan and go Dan, Josh, and then Squirrel. So Dan, what you got?
Cool. Hello, everybody. Dan from Avenue Studios. You can find us on YouTube, Rumble, and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Our big thing is we live stream Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, and during these themed collaborations with the Inn of Planar Crossroads, at the beginning of the month, we build a one-shot in Foundry Virtual Tabletop based on some of the concepts we talk about in the discussions here. And then at the end of the month, we play test it in a live game, and our supporters from Locals and Patreon enter a raffle to be the players in that game. It's been a ton of fun so far. Very much looking forward to Modern May. As of recording this, we're coming up on that one, so really look forward to that. Can't wait for High June. And so join the Ever-Growing Forest if you want to get in on those games, and I am very much looking forward to this weird discussion.
All right, Josh, what you got?
Hey, I'm Josh from Copper Dragon Games. You can find me over on YouTube making videos about role-playing games, usually 5e and virtual tabletop resources. Currently playtesting a 5e variant called Rosetta 5e with some friends and Patreon supporters, and looking forward to the Weird West discussion coming up in this video.
Side note, I remembered recently where I first saw one of Josh's videos. It actually wasn't when I first started commenting. It was when he made something on Foundry BTT, a video on Foundry BTT, so there you go. Those long ago videos, you know?
Way back.
All right. Well, that means we are to our last collaborator today, who we shouted out last month and decided to join us this month.
Yay.
Squirrel.
That's me, Scrat, or the Squirrel from A Squirrel Plays. I'm over there on YouTube, and we talk about TTRPGs, video games, and a minute amount of cinema. And we talk about things like plot, characters, world building, game balance, game mechanics, that kind of things. It's about creating and building our own stuff and trying to encourage other people to kick out their ideas instead of just sitting on them and letting them collect dust. To actually take them and use them and share them and enjoy them and get out there with them. And yeah, it's been a nice ride so far. It's caught more traction than I ever thought it would at this point.
It's funny what kicks off. All right. So that's all of our announcements. And you probably noticed that Levi's not here. He was not feeling well this time. But that doesn't mean we're not doing his spotlight. We're spotlighting Jacob from Avenue Studios, who is the full-time GM that was alluded to earlier. He is got slots available still, and he's going to be running some games, and I'm sure he's going to add more slots later. So go ahead and check him out. He's over on Start Playing, and That's Jacob from Avenue Studios, now a professional game master. So there we go. All right.
He's pretty cool.
He's pretty cool. He was here earlier. All right. That's enough of this prelude to get in and done with. Grab your preferred beverage. Pull up a chair by the hearth. And warm or cool yourselves, depending on when you're watching this during the year, as we discuss the Weird West. So, like we've been trying to do, we didn't do it one time, but we're going to go ahead and start with Levi's point that he wanted to bring up, even though he couldn't be here.
Yes.
So,
you have a strong option to start off the campaign as a pretty normal Western with rising strangeness, or alternately, if I can talk, let your players be the weird in your Western. In parentheses, for now.
there you go.
That kind of bounces off of what we were, Adam, you were ending our last chat with.
Yep. Being the weird that's in the West.
Mm-hmm.
So, I almost wanted to title this Weird West. And I was really tempted, but I decided, no, I'm going to save that for if I run a Weird West. And
Fair enough.
because making thumbnails, you want to get snappy in it, if you can. So, the Weird West, I'm pretty sure that I've got more notes than everybody, so I'm going to start us off, and we can just roll with them. For the Weird West, this is where we get to take the two other chats that we had and smush them around and mash them together and decide the other three chats and see what we want to do with them. Because you can do something like your classic curses. If you want to do something with like vampires, werewolves, and things like that, in which case you're using World of Darkness or Werewolf, some of those White Wolf systems, or your preferred system if you want. Or you can do aliens coming down to Earth and encountering the 1800s type of people. You don't think about it really, but technically the John Carter series, John Carter of Mars and so on and so forth, he's a guy from the 1800s that goes to Mars. Well, that universe's version of Mars. They actually went to Mars. But you have that option. I mentioned Outlaw Star before. It does fall into the more weird Western than it does specifically fantasy or specifically sci-fi. It mixes all that together. Those are really good options for doing that and messing around with a spell slinger. But my favorite way to play and mess around with a weird Western is to do the Lovecraftian thing. It is to make it dangerous, to make it spooky, like a good spooky Western. So, Wendigos were mentioned last time. My favorite Wendigo I've found so far is one in The Wendigo by Algernon Blackwood, who was somebody that Lovecraft would read. And then, if you want something set specifically in the West, The Curse of Yig by Lovecraft / Zelia Bishop. They worked together on that. That's a really good one. So those two are excellent stories for taking that type of era of time and mixing in that spooky, creepy, Lovecraftian thing. And depending if you want to be more heroic or less heroic, you can use different systems. You can use Call of Cthulhu for the dangerous version, that heavy taxing of the sanity, or you can use Pulp Cthulhu for the not so taxing, more heroic type of stuff. So that's kind of my lead-in. So you guys can take it from whichever one of those you want to.
The Cthulhu is a really interesting. It's a great idea to put it in a Western too, because you could lean into the isolation and going crazy, slowly losing your sanity and all that, and you're on the edge, like we talked about too. So that's a great idea.
Oh, I almost forgot. There's another one that was about a South American mine that they'd started digging and found a darkness that they couldn't find the end of.
Oh, mines are good for a Western too.
Yeah.
Cave-ins, explosives not working properly, all that good stuff. That's cool.
So, that's my preferred type of weird Western. So, there's that Cowboys and Aliens movie, but I didn't. That's much more lighthearted than my dark, depressing Western where you lose your sanity.
Did you guys ever play any of Fallout 76?
My wife did.
I haven't played it.
I wish she was here.
I've watched several lore videos, but I haven't played it.
I was saying, it seems like there's parts of it that kind of touch on what you're talking about here, I feel like, from what I remember. Granted, they're like kind of modern hillbillies instead of cowboys, but...
Well, I mean, not a whole lot of difference, but speaking as a hillbilly myself, but I still carry a 6-gun around, so I'm not that far off.
All right.
But
well, they had some. Yeah. They had their weird monsters, like they had their Wendigos in there. They all came from the insane asylum, I think, if I remember right. Every time you killed one and you looted them, they always had loose screws on them. The joke was, since, they came from
That's so good.
Yeah.
I mean, okay,
100% drop rate.
That may be something that might have to happen if you do a Weird West, because you can do a fun Weird West too. I just prefer the dark, depressing Weird West, but you can do a fun Weird West if you want to.
For sure.
They always drop screws that are loose. Ooh, that could be interesting too. What if your characters... That would be fun too, to play a twisty game with it. Kind of a Weird West, with the idea that your players find screws loose on everybody who's come from the insane asylum, but when one of them falls, their friends, pick them up, and then out of their pocket of their friend falls a few loose screws.
I like that.
So maybe they're not all as sane as they think they are.
Oh man, that's what is that? Somebody made up that monster and I always forget what it's called, but it feeds off of people and slowly makes them disappear as the game goes on. I'm gonna have to look it up. I think.
Are you talking about
one for a Weird Western?
The False Hydra?
False Hydra. Thank you. I always forget about that. That could be really good in a Western town. Well,
the thing with the False Hydra is you forget about it when you're not looking at it. It's like the silence from... I think it technically came before the silence from Doctor Who, but it's like the silence from Doctor Who.
That could be really cool in a frontier town. Especially how we've talked about community is really important, and to have these members of the community slowly disappearing, and the players are the only ones that know, because once they're gone, everybody else is like, no, we've never had a shop owner. We've been hoping somebody would come out here and take his place or something, but...
Right, because it modifies memory as it does it.
Yeah. That would be fun.
So, it can get really spooky too. Because with the False Hydra, if I remember correctly, there could be a blacksmith with a wife and a son and stuff like that. And slowly, it calls one at a time. Well, the whole city knows about this. The whole town would know about the blacksmith. but there's no blacksmith. You just ride into town, not knowing what's going on. And when you do, you see that there's a blacksmith shop. The forge has been used recently. And you go in, you say, "Where's the blacksmith?" And the woman at the counter says, "Well, there's no blacksmith." "What do you mean? There's got to be. The forge has been used recently." No, there's no blacksmith. She has a ring on her finger. "Well, is your husband around?" "I don't have a husband. It's just me and my boy." Well, and in this oddness, this weirdness of inconsistencies can really feed the atmosphere of a game fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one could be really good. Especially, again, on the frontier. You're out there, there's no one coming. You gotta figure it out for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, that thing probably targets the sheriff first. If anybody's gonna fight it, you get rid of that thing. Get rid of the sheriff first. Then you can pick off all the other townsfolk at your leisure.
And you can play it fun too if you want to mix the fantasy but fake it out. You could make it where, oh yeah, it looks like magic. It looks like, because if your players have played TTRPGs for a while, they may have just found out about a false Hydra. So instead, you make it seem like a false Hydra, but what you actually done is have a spaceship crash nearby, and the aliens have been coming in and psychically changing their memory. And they don't care if they're particularly good memories, because they're going to fly away. They're just using them as scientific fodder for their experiments or something.
Yep, classic.
Or the aliens came and nobody has the right memories because Will Smith came through with the little flashy thing.
Yes.
And
No, neuralizer. It is alluded to, if you do that too much to somebody, they do start to lose long-term memory. So, there's a thing. So that's what I've got. You guys are getting tired.
Yeah, probably. No, I'm trying to think of.
Yeah.
We've hit a lot of elements. I mean, it's the Cthulhu is so good too because of the character stories too. That's because what we've always talked about with the Westerns, coming back to the personal stories, and that always has that so well. So I'm trying to think of other elements. Well, the other one, going in a sci-fi direction, I've always liked, and it's kind of in the same vein of going off of the thing I'd suggest in sci-fi too, of being out on I'll pull Star Wars in, you're on a moisture farm out there in the desert, but it's legit. And so there could be a lot of that Western feel of you're caring for this. Probably your shout out to Mush for your animal companion is more droids, but one has a little bit of hair on it for some reason, just for Michelle. But
it's the wires.
Droids. Yes, it's the wires. Oh, that's good. You have your droids you're caring for and stuff, but you could play with a slow growth of insanity out. In this far planet, you're the only one there, or it could be a good solo game or one-player game too, or just feeding into that insanity aspect and really playing with that, whether or not it's real or not. It could be that could have that good feeling of being on the edge, being alone, isolated, resources dwindling. And adding in that aspect of, am I going crazy or not? So I think a Western actually feeds into the suspenseful gameplay, and a Western could work really well.
Well, I had a story in mind that I wanted to write. I'm not sure if I can write it or if I just have to play it with some people. The idea is it is a sci-fi. It's very 50s kind of sci-fi, where they've got hover trucks and stuff like that, They're out on a Mars-like type of mostly desert planet that doesn't get really any water. Maybe there's ice caps, but that's it. And something starts to happen. This group of people that are doing probably some mining, some small scale mining for certain ores and things like that. They are cut off from communications from town because no one's answering back. And so they start to do that, and the terraforming has kind of, maybe it started a little bit. They've started to try and introduce more moisture in. And they've been having some trouble because the moisture seems to keep going away. The planet has some stores of moisture underneath, but it doesn't seem to cycle up. And in the desert sand winds, the main character or the group would see a dark figure out there, kind of just standing up. And then they look out again, they try to get their friend's attention, and it's gone. And slowly you build in this idea that something's out there. Just the statement of something's out there is enough to get your players. And as you start to build that more and more, the story would have gone that it would seem like they would start to find desiccated corpses that had puncture wounds on the side of their neck and were drained of all their fluids. And so they would start to think, space vampires? Or something like that. And it would eventually come across to the discovery that, spoilers for a story that hasn't even been written. It's not a vampire. It's a life form on the planet. They're basically like big ticks. But they're like flat discs. And these flat discs, no one thought they were anything because they're carbon-based life forms. They're carbon-based life forms that are very not carbon, they're silicon-based life forms. So they don't pick up as regular life forms would. So they basically are just dormant insect tick-like things that latch onto any moisture and suck it dry until they can find a big enough one, like a human body, that they can run for a little while to find more water, to find more moisture. And so they run it for a little while, and now it's like a zombie horde type of game inside of a sci-fi type of thing with these not vampire ticks that kept going around. And that's a very weird wedge. You're taking sci-fi Western, you're taking your space Western. The towns are very much that way, and the terraforming would have woken them up because the heavier moisture, the more moisture was being introduced. And so they would have woken up, and you'd had all this type of things that could mix in to make this an interesting discovery. And all that your players are trying to do is get to the main spaceport and get off the planet.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
I kind of want to play that campaign, but now it's been spoiled. So it wouldn't be... I want to be a player in that, except modify my memory so I forget the last minute and a half of...
So I just wait until next year?
Yeah, because I won't remember. You're right.
I was thinking another option, bouncing off of Levi and Adam's idea of letting the players bring in the weird, and because we haven't done our traditional shout out of Supernatural, is the idea of the bounty hunters, because you could see Supernatural as like bounty hunters in a sense, if they're the ones seeking out the weird preternatural and supernatural things in a place, and then playing off of setting it in a Western setting with all those, again, going back to some of maybe the native mythos around that, those times and those things, and then making them actually real, classic Supernatural style. And but most people don't know about it. You're the bounty hunter characters that come into towns. You're the weird Lone Ranger types, the strangers that come into town to deal with a problem. Half the time the people think you're the ones because the problem wasn't really around till you guys showed up.
Yeah.
That could fit really well in a Western, I think. And just taking all the tropes from Supernatural of changing your identity, where you go around dealing with law, you're on the edge of law enforcement, dealing with the sheriff or whoever's there, and that could be really fun.
Well, one of my favorite episodes of Supernatural is the one where it's about the Scarecrow. I don't remember exactly what it is. It's the Scarecrow, and they're just in this kind of a bit of an idyllic town, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But there's something weird here.
Yeah.
And that can be interesting, too, to have your players find something weird in a relatively normal town. Just anywhere. Because they're solving a personal problem again.
Right. Yep. I was thinking vampires could be a great thing, too, in the West as well, with just taking the romance aspect and, you know, all that stuff with the vampires and the sensuality. That could work really well in a Western setting.
Well, Miss Kitty as a literal vampire.
Yes, there you go.
I mean, she got Marshall Dillon. So. Well, you could do, there's also the idea of the different forms of vampires, the different forms of werewolves in different cultures. Like the Native American skinwalker is not the same thing as a werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have that type of idea there of taking something that's fairly familiar and then twisting it just a bit, or making certain things right and certain things wrong. The older legends of a vampire like Nosferatu or something like that are not quite the same as Vlad, you know, Dracula type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you can play around with it quite a bit.
I just thought of another one too, is Crossroad Demon.
Oh yes, very characteristic. Yeah,
that could be a lot of fun to play with.
Well, the Crossroad see, the fun things about Crossroad Demons is that you in the lore, you're supposed to be able to summon them. Like, they'll come if you call, type of thing, if you want to make a deal. So you have if it's real in your setting, you have a reliable way of talking to a demon and making a deal with one. And you have to make a deal, you got to make it where you have to make a deal if you want to talk to them, or something like that. Unless you play it even more weird, where you're just summoning them for your weekly card game. So,
or a shout out to our past chat about House of the Rising Sun.
Yes,
and our build around that could fit too. With like, maybe there's this one place that kind of just shows up at this certain time, and then disappears with the rising sun. And it's all wet, and maybe the demons are there playing cards. I'm hearing the jingle of the spurs as you walk in.
And you could do an entire town in that sense. They come. Your players are outlaws that have just robbed the train.
Classic. Yes.
They have to hide, and they come to this town, and it's supposed to be deserted. But they see people there, and they're like, we don't have any choice. We have to go to town. We need water. We're going to die. So they're going in, they're getting their drinks and stuff like that. Very cautious. But everybody's really friendly. Everybody's fine with them. They say, hey, you got any money to lay down for a card game? Stuff like that. And it's through it's probably a one shot, but you might do a some shot with it, where they have this slow reveal. These people aren't quite right. Something's different. And it becomes a thing like something that Wicked This Way Comes, where it's subtle deals, subtle statements that start to lead into this idea of, wait a minute. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave.
They all got loose screws in their pockets.
All right. So there's some ideas for people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are pretty close to time, I think. My timing's correct. So, do any of you tired people have final thoughts? We gotta assign final thoughts. So, final thoughts will start clockwise from Josh. So, Josh, Dan, Scrat, me.
All right. On the spot here. All right. So, final thoughts, Weird West. I think the obvious go-to system for me, I think, would be Savage Worlds, because they have the Deadlands setting that's already like built and ready to go. But I think the second that might be a little forgotten or not thought of very often these days is Rifts.
Oh yeah.
If anybody's familiar with Rifts, they had like a New West book that detailed like the Cyber Knights and the Gunslingers and it was really the cover had like a bandit riding on a cybernetic horse, but it's post-apocalyptic, very techno-magic infused, but a really interesting take on a Western setting in the Midwest, with a lot of the tropes that we've been talking about in this series, and I think Rifts has gotten a lot of flack over the years for being an outdated rule set, but I had a lot of fun with that rule set back in the 90s. And it might be worth picking back up again at some point.
You never know.
Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I'm not familiar with that one. That's awesome.
All right, Dan. What you got?
Tag on Matt. I think my final thought is... it's gone now. We'll find a new one. No, I think it's there's the Western setting with the isolation. That's what I was thinking about. The isolation aspect really, I think, can be a good trope to use for when you're getting weird and making the players feel alone. It's not the only angle, but I'm really drawn to that right now. I like that idea. Whether you're doing it kind of goofy or more on the dark side with the Call of Cthulhu and stuff, getting into that aspect and making them feel alone, making them feel like, why doesn't anyone else see this? Or why am I alone in experiencing this? And starting to feel that separation and making it character driven again, too. It some inter-party dynamics and confrontation could really feed into that Western trope, because the making the party the family that needs to stay together, but this weirdness is pulling them apart, I think could be a really fun way to play with the Weird West. So comment below if you've tried that or if you do, because I love TTRPG stories.
All right, so there's the comment of this time, I guess. I love TTRPG. You got to put more than one O. I love TTRPG stories.
Yeah, I think at least 3 feels right. More is always welcome.
You can
and some heart emojis too.
Yeah.
Yes.
You are allowed to substitute a U for the O's if you want to. All right, what you got, Squirrel?
Well, so spooky is actually one of my weaker writing points. It's something I'd really like to get better at. Yeah, it's something I come up short on, but I really like when things are... I don't want to say when things are done properly, but, there's a certain way that I like it. I like the spooky when it's just kind of the atmosphere and not knowing what's around the corner. Not spooky. Yes, there's something out here violently butchering people. It's like, yeah, whatever. I'm talking about like that old Mel Gibson movie Signs, The Village, even Super Metroid back on the SNES. Like that one was, to me anyway, back when I was little, that was spooky because the music was eerie. There was a lack of baddies running around to shoot up. It was kind of empty and alone, right? So it was, you didn't know what was around those, well, not around the corner, because they didn't have corners in that, but through the door when you changed the screen, you know, like you didn't know what was coming. I like that kind of spooky. And I think, golly, the only time I've come kind of close to that was I was running my players through a dungeon, and there was a lot of water involved, and there was something in the water in every room they went to. It was the same monster getting around, but they didn't know what it was. They couldn't see it, and they couldn't directly fight it. The way the map was laid out, they had ways to try and stay out of the water, but whenever they messed up, something would slice them, and then at the end of the dungeon, they found out what it was, and I mean, it might be kind of a lame reveal because you're missing the whole story, but it was a rat folk that had a bunch of blades attached to their tail, and they were able to swim through the water real fast.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
awesome,
that definitely is a subversion.
Yeah, they had a lot of fun with that part. That whole dungeon, it was broken up into 3 parts, one of it being watery, and they enjoyed it, so I was happy, but I don't know if that kind of hits that spooky side. Definitely not Western, but I don't know if that would be considered spooky.
Although that would, in a sense, we've talked a lot about mystery in Westerns. There's a mystery there and the unknown and the environment. I also love that too because it taps into kind of that childhood thing of the things you're afraid of and you finally see what they are. Most of the time it's like, oh.
Yeah, well, and
I shouldn't have been that afraid.
Yeah, it kind of threw them because the other 2 parts of that dungeon were also rat folk. There was one waiting for them, so when they got to the water side, they did that last, and they're like, well, there's not a rat in the water. What's going on?
You've obviously never seen rats swimming.
Yeah.
It's like Master Splinter with a knife tail.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
You are too slow. Now. All right. Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to cheat because I'm going to point out 2 things. Only because I think that Squirrel missed a huge opportunity. We're talking wild, weird West here, and he didn't even mention Squirrel Cowboys.
That's true.
It's shameful.
That would be really adorable.
Squirrel Cowboys riding prairie dogs.
Oh my goodness.
I'm telling you, missed opportunity.
It's one of those weird settings where you're like, why are these animals sentient, but these animals aren't? I don't understand.
Have you watched...
Is this a real thing?
Have you watched American Tail? Come on now.
Yes.
So there is that game Mouse Ritter. Have you ever played that?
Oh, I've seen that. I haven't played it.
No.
I played one not too long ago, just a little one shot. It's pretty great. It's real simple, straightforward, easy to pick up and go with. But yeah, you're playing actual mice. Like you're that size. You're a small mouse, so you know snakes are bad news.
Yep. So if you want to play a squirrel RPG, you play that one. You can play the Red Wall RPG. Those type of work too. So that was my inserting for Squirrel since he didn't a final thought there. And then my personal final thought is that so much of our talk has been talking about survival. This one is too, because in this particular time, if you're doing spooky Wild West, not funny Weird West, but spooky Weird West, the spooky Weird West doesn't mean that they have to beat the monster. It becomes survival horror. It becomes you just have to survive. You just have to make it through the night, or you just have to make it through this time period where this is here. Maybe this is, you could really play it up with the isolation if you take the sandstorms that come through in the west, and a freak one blew up, and perhaps you kind of lead into it a little bit. You don't start with the sandstorm. Your players know that a sandstorm is going to come, but what you actually start with is them overhearing some of the natives talking about how the storm is coming again. It's returning. The thing's coming back. Or they even get it third hand from a prospector who talked to a tribe who are, they're not trading with anyone right now. They are going into hiding into the caves, into the adobe caves. And they're going to their sanctuary or something that they call it, the Anasazi type of idea. And they're going to go over there and hide because the storm is coming again. The Sandman returns. And they go back. And that's how you start to filter it to your players that something's off. But they just think, oh, superstition, right? We're playing in something else. And it's really good if you do it in a system that's not designed for it. Because then they're like, what? What? So, yeah.
I like that.
That is cool.
So that's mine. They don't have to win, they just have to survive.
Mm-hmm.
That's my kind of point for that one. If you do Weird West, that's spooky. I think that's what we've got.
I was going to say real quick, that's kind of how that index card RPG game went. We didn't beat that angel at the end. We took off.
Yeah.
Yep. It's, you just got to survive.
Yep.
You don't gotta kill no angel. You just gotta survive.
Yeah. It's like what Jake said. There's always loose ends.
There's always loose. Nice little loose end there. Oh, I can't believe we've come this far and haven't mentioned Once Upon a Time in the West.
Oh my goodness.
That is a really good. That is basically an opera set in the West. So, watch that one too. Okay, I had 3 points. We need to get this wrapped up. So, any final points before we wrap up all of our June recording, guys? As far as, more final points after you've got your other final point?
Comment below.
All good.
All right. Well then, as always, travelers, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
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 This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
I think you call it exploding crits. Whenever you crit, you roll again.
Nice.
And as long as you roll another crit, you keep going and going and going. So somebody came around the corner with the revolver, got a crit, and then a crit, crit. And I made the comment, I was like, all right, he's over there just fanning the hammer. And my wife was like, I know what those words mean, but in that sentence and the way they're strung together, I do not know what that means. And then I explained it to her, and I showed her a picture of it, and she's like, there is neither a fan nor a hammer. I was like, well, technically there is a hammer.
That's awesome.
And she comes over and you just show her a picture of some kid waving a big fan on a hot hammer.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh man, that's hilarious.
Okay. So we are to Weird West now. I have a lot of notes for this one, so we're on to Weird West. I mean, we're getting into my territory with some of my things.
Oh, boy.